All right. So who's the new speaker going to be?
Oh God.
I don't care. They're not going to be.
Yeah.
They're not going to be any better than Kevin McCarthy or Mike Johnson, unless it's Tom Massey. That's the only. Tom Massey's the only guy, but you won't get the votes.
You'll end up hating him too, dude. There is no Goldilocks Speaker of the House, not for Republicans. We're just not built like Democrats.
Well, not with the numbers that they have. You know, with the numbers they have, and that's the thing. No matter whether we talked about McCarthy before, whether you were fans of him or not, or whatever, at the end of the day, you got him. You got to keep your house in order, stick them out, move on to the next election, whatever. What they don't realize, though, is it doesn't matter who the speaker is. The numbers are not necessarily in your favor on everything. You still need votes. I mean, that's what it comes down to. And the membership of the House has not changed enough for you to have like this, ideological shift in what comes to the floor and what doesn't. I mean, I get there are certain, circumstances, what you bring and what you don't bring, but at the end of the day, you still need votes, and it comes down to this. It comes down to, it's binary. You've got two choices. You've got one, hey man, you get the best deal that you can because the government's got to continue on. Or two, you've got and this is the MTG, Tom Massey, theory is just shut it all down. And a lot of people want that.
No, they don't. The polls show not a lot of people want that. I'm
saying the people in the House, like MTG. Okay. There's no doubt in my mind that she just wants to shut it all down.
Well, I
think that shutting it all down.
I know. I think maybe, but I think that she and these other yahoos in there, Gates and all these people, I think they just want to be on TV. That's what I think. I mean, they're going to get reelected no matter what. And this is where I side with one of our listeners a little bit, Teddy Bear out there. It's like, look, you can make a difference, but you're not going to make a difference by shutting it all down and just being hard line on everything. As good as that would feel at the time, that's not going to pay dividends in the long run. It's not. So you have to take baby steps. You have to take baby steps to get back to where you want to be. You got to take a stand on a few of these, omnibus spending bills. Take a stand, like make it a symbolic stand, something, but circle the wagon so everybody can get on the same page like Democrats do, and take baby steps to try to get back, to where you think you want to be. But you can't do it all at one time. And that's what they're trying to do. And it's embarrassing. They're not getting anything done. They're making themselves look foolish. And, they put him up for a vote. It's just whatever. I throw my hands up. Like, what are you accomplishing by doing this? You're not changing my mind on anything. You're not changing Josh's mind on anything. I don't think. Josh, would it change your mind? Oh, we're going to oust him too and get another speaker that's just the same as the last two.
Not unless it's Tom Massey. Because Tom Massey would not have capitulated on the FISA warrant thing. Tom Massey would not have capitulated like Mike Johnson did on requiring a warrant for U.S. citizens who come across the FISA courts. Which that right there, to me, that's an unforgivable sin. I don't care who's sitting in that chair. The minute you capitulate on that is an unforgivable sin. And for that reason alone, Johnson should go. That reason alone, they should kick him to the curb.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think I agree with you. Don't disagree that warrantless. Maybe Roger can break down FISA for us after I get off. Warrantless spying on Americans, even in passing, I'm totally against that. You don't need a warrant to spy on a foreigner. That's not the point. That's not what any of us are saying. You can spy on as many Parisians and Iranians and whoever, but the minute there's incidental contact with a U.S. person, which there's always going to be that. It's at some point, it's truly a rubber stamp where they're like, "Yep, okay, we're gonna grant this FISA, and you're allowed to basically spy on American citizens." Now, the warrant, I don't know how much good that will do. It's symbolic because they're just going to rubber stamp it anyway. That's my view on it. And my other view is, I think FISA is the least of our concerns, really. If you're talking about, privacy and search and seizure and stuff like that, we've talked about this on the show before, where they revamped the intelligence oversight, and everybody's data is getting scooped up. It's just not being looked at yet. So yeah, FISA, yeah, I get it. I hate it too. But I really think the big picture, that's the least of our worries.
It comes down a lot to your individual rights. Our individual rights are being eroded by our elected representatives. Half the people out there in the country don't even care. The other half don't even know what's going on. But you had the FISA thing we've talked a little bit about before. But bottom line is, you have contact with some foreign intelligence entity, or we had the ability to monitor that, and we don't have to go get a warrant. That time, I say we, as in United States government. The problem is, because your Egyptian in Egypt who's planning to bomb the U.S. or whatever has no rights. Okay, that person has no constitutional rights. The problem is when that person comes into contact with an American citizen via email, telephone call, in person, whatever. FISA doesn't, under the current FISA in Section 702, you don't have to go get a warrant. Right? He's like, hey, you know what? We're going to start collecting data and conducting surveillance on everybody who's in touch with that bad actor, wherever that person's from. And right now, the way it's written is, if you've got 5, 10, 15, not just one American citizen who's tied in with that, all that data is collected without a warrant. And not even people that may even have anything directly to do with that individual. Because what happens, right, when that individual is under surveillance, and it's openly known out there, you start pulling everything. They start pulling everything. The governments pull everything. Everybody that's in contact, every form of communication. Now, my problem with all this is, and to me, being a reasonable person, I think all of us being on both sides of the house here, a good compromise is like, hey, man, you want to spy on the rest of the world? I'm all for it. Do it. I don't care if it makes it out there or not. They're doing it to us, right? But it's a necessary evil. Not even an evil. It's something that you have to do. The minute that touches an American citizen, go get a warrant. Because if you have that much compelling evidence because here's the other thing, you're looking at time and resources. So if there's that much compelling evidence that I need to waste my time and resources and American tax dollars, and we just passed tax day, so that already pisses me off. But if you're going to waste that kind of time, resources, American tax dollars to go conduct that type of surveillance on a foreign national, then you should already have the evidence to go back to an American court and say, hey, you know what? I need a warrant to conduct surveillance on Josh or Luke or whatever, because he's in contact with this individual who we believe belongs to an international terrorist organization that's going to conduct an attack on American soil. And it's not being done. Josh just typed, FBI misused the FISA database over 278,000 times. And that's what they know of. Probably twice that, at least. And we've been on both sides of the house with this. Fortunately with us, with what we were doing, it was very, very strict. But you hear it all the time with FISA, and it should kind of get swept on the rug. What bothers me, so one, I think that was a good compromise. What bothers me, the way that it was handled with Speaker Johnson, is, okay, so today I'm for FISA, except for Section 702. I think you need to have a warrant, once the minute that it touches an American citizen. So today I am for your individual freedoms because you have rights under the Constitution. Now, hold on. Phoebe comes in here, takes him in this back room, gives him a 1-hour classified brief, comes out and says, hey, screw your rights. Actually, we're good to go. We're going to go ahead and throw this up for a vote. So your rights were important yesterday, but because of this, like, Luke, you tell me, what could they have possibly showed him? What type of data could they have possibly showed him in that 1-hour classified brief that said, you know what? Yeah, your individual rights. Yeah, they were important yesterday, but not as important as Section 702 today.
They showed him some case studies, I'm sure, of when it did work and they did foil something, whether it was lone gunmen or something. They probably cooked up some anecdotal cases and said, look, if we hadn't had this attack would have taken place. That's probably not all they presented to him, but that was part of it. I mean, we can all, that just shows you he's not a principled person when it comes to, right? Because what do they say, Josh? What do they say about security and freedom?
Yeah, there was Benjamin Franklin. Those who choose security over freedom will soon lose. Will have neither and soon lose both.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think they showed him? What do you think they said to him?
Exactly what you said. They probably made up some BS vignette and, overemphasized it and, dramatized it and was like, this would have been, 9/11 part 2 if we wouldn't have FISA. And to that, I say, I don't care. I would rather be less safe than less free. I will stand by that every day of the week and twice on Sunday. But for them to turn around and come out and be like, well, trust me. No, if there's people on this planet that I don't trust, it's the people inside the Beltway. You're the first people I don't trust.
Yeah, it boggles my mind. I mean, we've been there, right? We've all admitted we've been there with, our number one mission is to keep people safe and, kill the terrorists and find them, root them out, and by all means necessary, right? I mean, I know I felt that way. I remember I used to think, why do we have all these rules, like these Intel oversight rules? Don't we want to keep people safe? I'm serious. I mean, that went through my head. And I always loved the movie Swordfish, remember the movie Swordfish with John Travolta, where they started this organization that existed outside of the government so that they could violate rights and they could do anything they wanted. I was like, yeah, that's what we need, but then I grew up and I realized, what Benjamin Franklin said and how valuable freedoms really are and how fragile it really is. And I know we haven't suffered too much yet, but as these rights are eroded and, are not necessarily being spat upon, but kind of be ground into the dirt, the possibility of the federal government exploiting these loopholes against the average citizen is growing more and more apparent. So I guess I started out by saying what boggles my mind is, that there are good FBI guys out there. I mean, there are. I mean, they're good people. There's also some dirtbags that all three of us can't stand. I understand how the dirtbags can revert back to the 27-year-old Lukester way of thinking by all means necessary. And, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. You can't catch the terrorists without violating a few rights of U.S. citizens. I don't understand how somebody who's past the age, a federal agent past the age of 27, which almost all of them are, can think that way. But yet many of them do, especially inside the Beltway, especially the GS-15s and the SESs, who are, running the head shed at the FBI. Roger, do you think that the average FBI dude out there in a field office in Omaha, Nebraska, or, Midland, Texas, or, Fayetteville, North Carolina, do you think that they are jackbooted thugs, or do you just think they're following orders, or do you think that maybe they have some compunction, some moral compunctions against what they're doing, and they would actually draw the line? Josh, I know what Josh's going to say, but I'm asking Roger on this one.
Now, you know what? You would hope there'd be some personal responsibility there. The problem is they think they know better as a whole. And I can't speak for the entire force, right? Just the ones that I've come in contact with. And like you said, there are some good folks like law enforcement or any other job. You have some really good ones. You have some bad ones. You have some in the middle. It's several fold. One, there's a job thing. There is just to shake your head. Yes, because, they've been on the force for 10 years, 12 years. They got a wife at home with a baby kid. And so you kind of go along. They want to get promoted. There's some self-serving, actions there. But at the end of the day, I firmly believe most of it is, well, I say 50-50. I think there's a job security piece of that and wanting to get promoted and do the right things, for their job as far as upward mobility. But I think it's, well, I know what's better. I know what's good for you. I personally am not going to abuse the law. Well, okay, you know what? I may actually skirt it here just a little bit because I'm protecting you. I'm doing the right thing, and it goes back to what Josh has always said with the FDA and recalls. Every recall was approved by the FDA first, right? They go through and they approve this stuff and they think, oh, I know what's better for you until it's not. And then you have not just one person. It's not just one or two people. It's 10s and 20s and 30s. And, it's, Josh is saying it's ingrained at Quantico. That's the whole point with, we give up certain rights to law enforcement, whether it be local, local, state, all the way up to the national level, because there is some sort of protection there and this and that. But you get to a point where you start violating, what I believe are our constitutional rights, because they think they know better. And I think with this here, it's such an easy solution. I mean, in my eyes, my mind, it's such an easy solution to say, hey, man, how hard, and I forget one of you said it. I think it was Luke, but it's the, a lot of times answers are no because of the resources that are involved, not because it's necessarily right or wrong. So it's like, well, you know what? We probably should get a warrant when it touches a U.S. person, but hey, man, it's too many resources to do that. We can't do that. And that's not the right answer. So, hey, you know what? Your rights were they were important yesterday, but and to me, I mean, I agree with what both you just said, that, what was shown to Mike Johnson. Like, I actually, and I know we'll never know, I want to know specifics, man. Like, I got to know, like, what would change your mind in a briefing that would say, you know what? Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and push forward, and we're gonna go ahead and continue to conduct surveillance, warrantless surveillance on U.S. citizens. Like, I can't even imagine a scenario where for the country that would change your mind.
Josh, what if part of the briefing was, this is how few times, or based on how the checks that, I'm just saying, what if, okay. What if in the briefing they said, these are the checks that are in place to ensure that the rights aren't being violated, right? That might be a different story, but that's not the feeling I got from Johnson coming out of there. I got the feeling that he was presented threats.
Yeah, that absolutely wasn't the feeling that I got either from Johnson coming out of there, because when he came out of there, it wasn't about, hey, they have shown that there are so many safeguards in place to ensure U.S. citizens' rights are, honored and not violated. I'm good with it. No, it came out and was like, hey, yeah, it's just, we really do need this to, ensure the safety of our citizens and, blah, blah. And it was that right after, Christopher Wray, spent the week prior really hyping up, like, there's some threats against the homeland. Can't go into specifics, but there's threats against the homeland. And that goes back to that whole, like, oh, well, yeah, sorry, you just don't have the proper clearances. It's super classified. It's really compartmented. I just can't tell you, but just trust me. Had the FBI not violated the FISA database over 278,000 times, had Kleinsmith not altered the email, which led to the FISA court approving the warrantless spying on the Trump campaign, and Kleinsmith only got 1 year of probation and 400 hours of community service, never saw the inside of a jail, and he's back practicing law again. Had that never happened, okay, all right, maybe I would be a little more inclined to trust you. Maybe. That's still debatable. But at this point, I don't care. I don't care how many safeguards are in place. It's a effing no, period. Get rid of 7. Get rid of it altogether. We don't need it, because you don't need a warrant to spy on a foreigner. So get rid of the entire thing.
What you're saying is, it kind of triggered something in me, and it kind of, in my mind, I should say, not in me. It's awkward. I don't know why. But here's the thing. Okay. You were saying, we talked about 9/11. This goes back to a conversation we were having over text, and maybe we can flow into that. I don't know how this is going to work out. But Josh is saying, some of the listeners like, well, Josh wants another terrorist attack. If we get rid of this, there'll be another terrorist attack. And just let me ask y'all a question. Y'all can pipe up however you want in whatever order. But let me pose this to you. As far as like tectonic historical shifts of what not necessarily defines a country, but what really affected a country historically. Like, we're talking over, hundreds of years. Which was the bigger event that will have a historical effect on the United States? The attacks on 9/11 or the potato famine in Ireland that caused the great influx of Irish coming into the United States? Which one of those two events causes the greater tectonic shift? I don't even know about COVID, man. We'll see about that. But I'm giving you two. Those are two totally. One's a terrorist attack, and one was an event that I believe radically not necessarily changed, but shifted the makeup of this country. You know, you call the Protestant work ethic or whatever you want to call it. Big picture, I'm answering for you guys, but y'all go ahead.
Well, I think both of them are very, very profound. They impacted the country in different ways. All right, you take 9/11,
but we're already over 9/11. I mean, except for the Patriot Act and FISA.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. Like that, if that impacted the United States in a way that'll, you know, erode. I think it eroded our freedoms quick. It's eroding our freedoms quicker than they would have been eroded had 9/11 not happened, because, you know, everybody was scared and everybody championed the Patriot Act, which was absolute, it just egregious assault on the Constitution. Yeah, you want to talk, you know, and so you know, the potato famine pushing the Protestants to the United States, and the, you know, massive influx of Irish in the culture and the work ethic.
Changed the demographic.
Yeah, it changed the demographic. I think it just they both of them changed the country just in different ways. So
what's going to be the bigger shift? And there's no right or wrong answer. It's just an interesting question on my end. You know, 7.2 million people that have come in the country in the past 3 years, or this latest renewal of the FISA. Like, what long term is going to affect the country more?
Oh, the illegal alien influx by far.
Interesting. How is that going to erode our rights? I'm not sharpshooting you. I'm honestly asking these questions seriously.
When you have illegals that are already, so contrary to, and I know this, we're dovetailing off this. So I know it's against federal law right now for illegals to vote in federal elections. They can and are, however, voting in local elections. So when you talk about how it's going to erode your rights, because I'm telling you right now, slippery slope, and you know, it's fallacy. Hey, whatever, man. I'm telling you, you go down that road and you end up with a bunch of illegals determining the laws that you live by. That's how your rights are eroded. These people that have left their countries for whatever reasons, whether it's for material reasons or persecution or whatever that cause is, they're leaving their place. It's like Californians moving to Arizona, man. Californians move to Arizona and they bring their same crappy laws that they left. They bring them here, and then you end up with the same crappy laws that you had in California. You're like, man, what happened? That's exactly what happens with that. You know, because they are already voted. I need to get a list, because there's already more than a handful of local municipalities where they are able to vote.
Well, not only that, but you're also looking at you know, apportions to the House of Representatives based off of them being counted in the census every 10 years, right? So I mean, it's not just a local elections. That's representation at the federal level,
and that's where
people
it gets
who
to, right?
should not
That's
be here to begin with.
Yeah, that's that second order of effect, because that's where I was going with it. That's exactly what happens as you get those representatives in there, because you get a broader representation. Now they start to represent those illegals. Okay, and we're not just talking about a couple 100,000. We're talking about the millions that come across, and that's how national laws are changed.
Yep.
So recently, how do I frame this? Because so down at the border, we saw something specifically with the Venezuelans. You know, we talked to all these people. We talked to, you know, time down there, hundreds of people, focused on different groups. You know, focused on the Venezuelans, the Chinese, focused on the Russians coming across. And as you know, we want to know certain things. You know, I mean, it's I think what's going on at the border, I think, will go down as one of the biggest missed intelligence opportunities in the history of the United States intelligence community. But we saw something happening with the Venezuelan organized crime, and they tend to go to big cities, right? And there's a Venezuelan crime group called Trindagua, and you've been seeing a lot of that on the news lately over the past month or two. Well, we found something and reported it up, you know, through the channels, and basically we got the smackdown. We got the smackdown saying that's not happening. This is an F6. You know, this is just not happening. We reported this like almost 2 years ago, bro. 2 years ago. And we got the smackdown, and they wanted to pull the reporting. I was like, that's not how this works. You can't just pull it. The reporting will stay out there, because we all know how that works. You know, you have to have the reporting out there so you can validate, right? Well, sure enough, man, it's happening. It's coming out on the news. It's out on the news right now. Exactly what we got smacked down for reporting 2 damn years ago. It's just this. I think that the second and third order effects beyond just the census and voting in local elections, I think we have yet to see what the third order effects are. I think we're seeing the second order. We can predict those, but the third order effects, man, I just don't know. But I still believe you guys. I mean, correct, maybe wrong on this, but I think if they would just tell the truth about it, we could have a debate about the truth on why we want the influx. And it's not just for the great replacement theory. We want them to vote Democrat. It's not just that. That's a happy side effect to the real reason we need unskilled labor. And that's it. We need unskilled labor, cheap labor. That's what we need. And our replacement rate is, we don't want to be in a China situation 20 years from now, or 10 or 15. That's why it's happening. That's why they want it happening. And this is just the easiest way to get it done. Like Roger was saying, I don't know who, I think that quote you were saying, the answer is no, because of limited resources and stuff like that. I think it's probably Josh that said that, not me, because I don't recall that. But the simplest thing is just let them all in. Just let them all in now, because trying to make this, legal and trying to, import, 3 million workers, which is probably what we need. It's probably close to 2 or 3 million families coming in. That would just be too hard to do. It would be too difficult. So let's just let them all come in. Let's let 7.3 million, mostly military age males, come in. I mean, do y'all agree that this is like, maybe that's the motivation for just allowing this influx just to happen? Or do you think it's just gross incompetence and replacement?
I think it might be both. I think a large part of it is gross incompetence, because unskilled labor, we're good on unskilled labor. We have plenty of unskilled labor.
Not cheap.
Yeah, I mean, we do, if you really want it. I mean, because what we need is we need Juan the electrician, and we need Juan the engineer. We don't need Serenity, the misgendered barista, with her $50,000, lesbian gender studies degree. We have plenty of that shit. They're everywhere. You can't swing a dead cat without hitting one of these clowns. We need educated, skilled labor, not unskilled labor. We got plenty of that. We have plenty of that crap. I can go down here to my Starbucks right down the street and find you 6 people who work there who are all unskilled.
I understand, but they're not going to do that work. They're just not. I mean, in an ideal world, yeah, we would, put a cattle prod to them and make them go, stack bricks at a build site, but they're not going to do it. So, and another thing, Josh, is Social Security, man. That's where I come with our, our falling, birth rate and all that stuff. Social Security now is 2 to 1. It's 2 to 1. It's not going to work. It used to be 16 to 1. When it first came out, there were 16 workers for every 1 person supported on Social Security. Now it's 2. It's 2 to 1. Not sustainable. Obviously, you look at your Social Security numbers coming out of your check. It's obviously we all know it's not sustainable. So they're trying. Yeah. I mean, I think that's part of the calculus. We need more people paying Social Security.
Yeah, Social Security hasn't been sustainable for quite some time, but you can't have a conversation about it, because as soon as you talk about reforming it, to where it actually will endure, then you're automatically vilified, because you're going to take Gam's monthly stipend away.
Yeah, George W. Bush learned that one. Man, they slammed him. Woo! And his plan was pretty good, man. I liked his plan. But Roger wants his Social Security. He's told us that.
Well, it's piss poor messaging on a lot of it. I mean, the reality, yeah, I want my money. I'm gonna get every damn penny of that damn thing. I hope it comes back to piss poor messaging on it. It's just like with everything else. I mean, I can't even say the entire GOP, those that, want to reform it, see a need for it. It's piss poor messaging, because everybody goes straight to Gam. And it's like, no, Social Security doesn't, when they make those changes, it doesn't impact those that are already on it. Okay. It impacts the younger workforce, but you never hear that. Once that news cycle, that headline comes out in those first 30 seconds, that's it. Nobody goes any deeper than that. And then it's all just junk and gets lost in the wash. And you would think by now the GOP, I mean, dude, I don't know how the Democrats are so good at messaging and getting that stuff out there first and circling the wagons, and the GOP is so bad at it. I mean, dude, I tell you, it's like, so if everybody's not tracking, so basically Arizona has, which there are a lot of Democrats in Arizona that believe the validity of laws are tied to how old it is. So we have an abortion law in the books from 1864, right? That basically says, hey, man, barring, the mother dying, you can't have an abortion here. Can't do it. Now, you can argue the merits of that, whatever, whether you think that's right, wrong, and different, whatever the, side you want to take on that. But the big argument with that is, well, it's a Civil War era law and we're subject to that. Right. But they get out there with their messaging first and the Republicans start backpedaling and there's no rebuttal to it. And I tell you what, there's a reason why the Democrats are making that a message here because, Josh, you know this. I mean, how'd the abortion issue work out with the midterms? Right. That's exactly what they want here in Arizona because Arizona is a swing state, or can be a swing state, depends on what goes on in a couple other places. And they want to make abortion the issue again. And the Republicans cannot get their messaging straight, whereas what you say is this. Yeah, we've said it a million times. It's the, hey, you know what, voters? Change it. That's what SCOTUS did for you. SCOTUS kicked it back to the 10th Amendment and said, voters, if you want to change this law because basically the Arizona Supreme Court, it was challenged and the Arizona Supreme Court came back and was like, hey man, I don't care how old the law is. Like it's in place. It is what it is. And so it's like, okay, well, if the majority of voters in Arizona want to change that, then put it on the ballot and in November, go vote to change it. You don't hear one word, crickets.
Those same people who are screaming about that Civil War era law are the same people who are screaming that Roe v. Wade was the law of the land since the 70s. And there's precedents, there because it's been on the books for X number of decades and it should be allowed to stand based on that alone. Right. Never mind the fact that it's, unconstitutional. Those same idiots are the same. Those are the same idiots doing that. And, it turned around and every time I see somebody say that, they're like, well, Roe v. Wade was the law of the land for X number of decades. And, that has to account for something. And it's like, okay, well, let's talk about Plessy v. Ferguson. That was 1896. So if we're going on just time, you're saying essentially that Plessy v. Ferguson should still be the law of the land, even though we know that was one of the worst Supreme Court decisions ever.
Oh, that's different though. That's different.
Yeah, it's same idiots. And these people vote, and the Democrats are smart for making abortion an election issue because the GOP is so bad at messaging that they can't get out of their own way. So it's smart. Dude, I give them credit, man. Smarter than Democrats. Make that an issue because the GOP is so jacked up on it that it's a win for them. It's an easy win.
So tell me this, Luke, and I know I'm jumping around all over the place. I get a lot going through my mind as I see all these headlines and stuff coming out. And I want to know what you think because this is very similar to the 2020 elections. So we talked about Ruben Gallegos and Kerry Lake being, they're running against each other for Senate, Kerry Lake being the Republican. In what world, now these are just polls, so I get it. They're not voters, but these are just polls. In what world, in Arizona specifically, does Trump lead Biden by 6 points, but Gallegos leads Kerry by 5 points? Who votes that way? Right?
Because Arizona's weird, man. Arizona's like
it's like
West
that
Virginia.
everywhere. It's like, who votes that way?
I don't know. Well, Arizona's elections were weird last time anyway. I mean, a little bit, weren't they? I mean, because you had local races where folks were winning, but Kerry Lake got beat. I from what I've seen, I couldn't pull out any numbers at this point at all anyway, because I don't memorize stuff like that. But I do know that West Virginia and Arizona are particularly weird. They're like Texas in the late 80s, like deep red state with a Democrat governor that everybody
I'm just thinking
loved.
like somebody legitimately goes in there and says, I'm voting Trump for president and Ruben Gallegos, who's as far left as you can get, And
Well,
that it's just mind boggling to me. I don't get it.
I know it's easier to vote straight ticket. You got to have a real hate in your heart to not vote straight ticket, right? I don't. I haven't voted for Ted Cruz since 2016, and I will not vote for Ted Cruz because I said I wouldn't. Now, if it comes down to a life or death kind of thing, where now you got to make a difficult decision, yes, okay, at that point I will vote for Ted Cruz, but not until that point. But I remember one time my great granddad, my dad just went ballistic, and this is before I understood what any of this was. I think I was like 10 years old. My granddad, great granddad, he liked like the county sheriff, right? And the county sheriff had to, or he didn't like the incumbent. He hated the incumbent sheriff. And the guy running against him ran as a Democrat. And this is like in Texas, like in Pampa, Texas. And my granddad, just to save time, voted straight Democrat ticket and voted for like Jimmy Carter or something. Or no, he voted for Walter Mondale. And because my dad, hey, who'd you vote for, Granddad? And he's like, I voted straight ticket to save time. So I couldn't vote against that incumbent sheriff, Schmedlap. My dad's like, you voted Democrat straight ticket? Why did you do that? Just to save time. So he's one of the few morons out there who voted for Mondale. So I think people do it to save time. It takes effort and it takes a real hate on to go down and boop, 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 boop. That's why they try to avoid local elections on, to coincide with presidential elections, because people can get really passionate about local,
Right.
I don't know. But to answer your question, my answer is Arizona's weird. I'm starting to respect Arizona. I mean, I love it.
Like straight ticket doesn't even explain that. Like you would literally have half the people that go in and say, I'm voting for Trump and nobody else. And then the other half that says, I'm voting for Gallegos and nobody else.
Yeah. Or they're just punching in a weird way. I don't know. I'd have to see how it works there. I mean, so will they be on the same ticket?
Yeah, I mean, we get the big Scantron, and he goes down, hey, for president, for senator, so it's all on the same. So you would have to, for the votes to turn out that way. And again, I'm not like an election analysis. I'm just, some common sense and observation. You would have to go in, and people are either just saying, the Trump voters are basically saying, well, I'm voting for Trump and nobody and nothing else down. And maybe that's the case. Maybe they just say, hey, it's a presidential vote. I'm voting for Trump and not messing with any of the down ballot, right? And then the Biden supporters are going in saying, well, you know what, I'm voting for Biden and the down ballot because they're more in tune with what's going on or whatever the case is. They care more, but not as many Biden voters because they don't like what he's doing. I mean, that's basically what has to happen.
But you're talking polls, and Josh, I don't trust any polls right now. Hardly any of them.
No one should.
But I am listening to what some of the talking heads on, some of the super liberal talking heads are saying on the other side. They do seem very discouraged. One of those, I heard a monologue on Michael Moore's podcast. There was a clip of it on the news. I don't know if Roger's nodding like he might have seen it. And Michael Moore is just like, Biden, you better get it straight because people are not going to show up. He's like, this is going to be a very low turnout because of some of his stances that he's making. Just don't make any sense. Which, God, we're going to get to Iran here in a second. But even Michael Moore is like sounding the alarm bells. He's like, this doesn't look good right now. It's not that Trump's just going to completely blow him out. It's just that people aren't going to show up. I mean,
people are going to show up.
81 million,
dude. Don't underestimate the Democrat. The Democratic Party.
Josh is going to get us banned. Go ahead, say it.
Don't underestimate the Democratic Party when it comes to getting ballot harvesting and filling out blank ballots. Yeah, remember that 3 a.m. bump Biden got in 2020. Mm-hmm. Bro, people, if it was Ron DeSantis that Biden was running against, I would probably agree. I'd be like, dude, people aren't showing up. People are just gonna be like, whatever. Like, we're actually, they might not be able to bring themselves to vote for the GOP, but they're not going to show up. Trump, and I swear to God, I can't believe I said his name. he is going to motivate people to get to the polls to vote against him. And the Democrats are going to bust people in. Like, it's going to be a full court press. Mainly not because they think Biden's doing a good job, but because they hate Trump. The GOP voters have to turn out. Have to. There's no other way around it, because the Democrats are going to turn out. They are going to turn out because they hate Trump that much.
Yeah, but it's been 4 years, man. I mean, I don't disagree with you, but that was fresh. I don't disagree with you. I don't think there's going to be 81 million votes. I'd be really surprised if there is. But that's not saying it's been 4 years. There's been a cooling off period. People still hate Trump, and there's a long time to go. But Trump was very fresh at that point. He's very fresh in people's minds. I don't know. You could be right, but I don't know, man. I just don't see the energy, and it's coming up on summertime. Remember what was happening in 2016 in the summertime, or not 2016, I'm sorry, 2020 in the summertime. And, the Black Swan event of COVID, it's getting too late for a Black Swan event like that. Well, God, I should knock on wood. But I did see the monkeypox break.
Monkeypox, dude. I am serious. Yeah, I know.
Tell the story real quick.
He sends this text and he goes, looks like Roger's been traveling through Africa, not telling anybody. And then he sends the link to, monkeypox outbreak that's supposedly like the next pandemic or whatever. Right. And I read the article earlier in the day, so I was familiar with it, but I've got my AirPods in and I'm doing these power hang cleans or whatever the heck I'm doing, or that I'm trying to do. And it comes through. So Siri, she reads the text. And so all I hear, from Luke, 2C3, looks like Roger's been traveling Africa. Like, what the hell is he talking about? I thought he was talking about Josh and my computer conversation earlier about the Middle East. And then it shows link to, she says something like, link to monkeypox outbreak in Africa. Dude, you caught me at like 3/4 swing and I dropped it on the little safety bar. And I just there are like 3 or 4 people around me, and I get my headset in, right? So I don't hear anybody or whatever, but it's like, I just start laughing, man. I just start laughing. And I'm so thankful that it wasn't like a quarter second later where I'd had it going up. I would have been in a bad way.
Roger be dead.
It was well played. Well timed.
But back to it. I mean, there's not going to be a COVID. Monkeypox is BS. It's just stupid. Yeah, I guess it could be riots. I guess this Palestinian stuff could get out of hand. Speaking of which, I am seeing these people become emboldened, not quite to the Antifa level, but they did shut down the Golden Gate Bridge. They shut down O'Hare on the way in. I see people getting emboldened. I don't like what I'm seeing, man. Because we're talking about the Middle East. We're talking about the Palestinians. I think somebody could do something crazy, man. But I don't think a lone wolf attack is going to, motivate and push everybody over the edge. What could maybe is World War III. I don't know. There's a long way to go, but I don't know, man.
Yeah, so they shut down O'Hare. They shut down the Golden Gate Bridge. They shut down SeaTac. And there was was it the Brooklyn Bridge in New York? They shut down in Oregon. Oh yeah, they shut down I-5 in Oregon. There was a couple hundred, I think, total arrested across the U.S. But what was crazy was Iran called for it. Iran specifically called for that, and it happened here in the United States. So, I don't think a lone wolf attack will. I don't think that's going to sway people's vote one way or the other. But like you said, we get involved in another hot war, then that may potentially sway. And wartime presidents, man, for some reason, a lot of time wartime presidents are popular.
I think he's really avoiding it though, because that's true, and it's traditionally been true, but a lot of those times in the war times, it's been justified, right? Like even or perceived as justified at the time. 9/11, Iraq, perceived as justified. World War II, all this stuff. This time, though, it sure seems like, and I think we're treading on Iran. I just want to get into this so bad. It seems like they're avoiding it. They're doing everything they can to avoid it, because if we did get into some kind of hot war, it would probably be the perception among the American people was, Joe, you got us into this because you're so weak and you made all the wrong decisions.
Maybe, but you see people like, and I've almost fell on the floor because I couldn't believe that I was actually reading it. Sheila Jackson Lee, of all people, came out and made a pro-Israel statement. It was like, this is, unjust, it's uncalled for. This is an attack on, our closest ally in the region. And she laid it out. And I was like, what am I I had to read that article twice, because I was like, they are not talking about Sheila Jackson Lee from Houston, Texas. They can't be. Not Crazy Pants, who thinks that, climate change causes earthquakes and that the moon generates its own light.
And it's made of gas.
Like that. Yeah, and it's made of gas.
Oh my
I
Lord.
was like, everybody knows it's made of cheese, right? So no, that's, plus you also you've seen a lot of rhetoric here, especially from the talking heads on social media and on the news, blaming Trump for the current crisis in Iran. Right. And now, I mean, I hope, because I don't have a lot of faith in the vast majority of Americans, but I would hope that, the vast majority of Americans is that, hey, man, that dude's been out of office for 3 years. It's kind of like when you get to a new duty station. Hey, you can only blame the last guy for the first 6 months. After that, you own it. It's you. You can't blame your predecessor after 180 days, man. That's on you now.
I'm guilty of that, dude. I'm guilty of blaming my predecessor, but that's the ground truth. What Josh said is the truth. It's like 6 months. Yeah, no, that's not that dog's not going to hunt anymore, boys. But so Roger, on the surface, I can't stop. I can't hold myself.
Well, go ahead and get into the Iran thing, and then get into what you said at the very beginning about it being theater.
Oh, I don't want to.
There's some more coming out on that. There's more coming out.
I know. So on the surface, if you're watching the news, you don't delve into this stuff. You just watch the headlines. It seems like that Iran just did the biggest Leroy Jenkins of all time, right? You remember the Leroy Jenkins video? It's a old Warcraft where, Leroy just runs into the room and they just get slaughtered. They weren't ready to go yet, and they just get slaughtered. But it's even worse because it's like as if Leroy Jenkins and the whole group announced to, the enemy NPCs in that room, hey, we're coming in 5 seconds. Like, we're going to come in. So just go ahead and get ready. And we're going to go ahead and come in, and they get just annihilated. Just a stupid move all around. I'll save it for you guys to get into the telegraphing, but so many of these things, and it struck me as odd. It's been striking me as odd since, I guess, what did they launch the attack? Saturday. This is over the weekend. But there were announcements since Thursday that's like Iran is going to launch an attack within 72 hours. I'm like, well, that's really good intel that you're putting out there for public consumption within the United States on every channel. It's like within 72 hours, something's going to happen. And then come to find out, and this is the telegraphing part, and there's more to this. But apparently, Iranian diplomats in Ankara in Turkey approached the Turkish and said, hey, we're going to launch an attack. We would like the U.S. to know this. Basically, it was more diplomatic than that. But they basically asked the U.S. pretty much, what are you going to do? And the U.S. just basically says, well, it's going to have to be a measured thing. We're expecting a measured attack. So I believe behind the scenes, and there's way more to this, dude, because basically for those of you who have been living under a rock and not watching the news, Iran launched about 300 vehicles, whether those were ballistic missiles, UAVs, whatever. They launched all these missiles, UAVs, all this stuff to hit Israel, and 99% of them were shot down before they hit. From what I can gather, the 1% that did get through hit the Negev airfield and didn't do much damage. So that's kind of strange. That's a lot of ordnance going through the air. And from what I read an article today that said 38% of them were shot down or actually crashed in Iranian airspace. And it's like, okay, this seems like what was Iran doing? Is their intel that bad? This is just, there's a lot to unpack here. I know I'm leaving out a lot of stuff, but that's why there's three of us so that we can bounce this around. It just seems like this was telegraphed. It seems strange. It seems staged. And I haven't quite made up my mind on exactly what happened, but I'm starting to get tinfoil hat on this a little bit. Now, before I kick it to whoever wants to take it, Josh or Roger, just hold up your hand or just chime in. Iran had to do something. But the strange thing is, this is why I think it was staged. It wasn't supposed to do that much damage, or maybe it was going to do a little bit, but I think that they thought maybe a quarter of them might get through. I don't know. But if this was a real attack, Hezbollah would have launched at least a portion of their 30,000 rockets they have in Lebanon, just over the border of northern Israel. Hezbollah didn't do anything. Well, they did very little. So this seems telegraphed. It seems staged. But dude, 99% of 300, to me, on the world stage, and we all know that in the Middle East, perception of power rules everything. And to me, right now, Iran looks very weak, very ineffectual. And speaking of, and I want to say one more thing, the Jordanians, the Saudis, they fully participated in shooting some of those down. Fully participated, which I also think, I also think that was part of the calculus. Hey, Abraham Accords, man. We're seeing a Sunni Shia split, and I think this is just very interesting on a number of levels.
So the breakdown was 170 drones, a little over 30 cruise missiles, and a little over 120 ballistic missiles that were launched or attempted to launch from Iran, against Israel. So the U.S., we brought down 70 drones, and 3 of those ballistic missiles were brought down by our ships and aircraft, and the rest are, shot down, Iron Dome, Iron Beam, all that stuff. But did Iran telegraph it? Did they do it? Yeah. The same way that after we killed Soleimani, Iran came out, got message to us saying, hey, we have to respond. We're going to launch some ballistic missiles at Al-Assad and a couple other places on this day. And so, a lot of the fellas were out at Al-Assad. So what did we do? We put them on birds and we flew them out to the middle of the desert, left a skeleton crew behind, and, they hunkered down, and, the ballistic missiles came, blew up some tents, and, some people made a big deal about it because some dudes got TBI, got concussed, and stuff like that. But they told us what they were going to do. And I think Iran absolutely, got message to us, hey, we have to respond. And I'll let Roger get into, what they were responding to if he wants to. If not, I'll cover it. But Iran does not want to they want to rattle their sword, but Iran does not want to get into a direct confrontation with Israel. They do not want that because they know how that's going to go. Iran knows that it cannot beat Israel in a direct confrontation. They cannot do it, especially when you have, when Israel has Jordan and Saudi Arabia by their side. You got King Abdullah of Jordan. That guy was probably flying Saturday night, shooting things down himself. Like, that's how base that dude is. And he was like, Israel has, use of our airspace, whatever they need. Like, that's how base that dude is. So I don't think it's that abnormal for Iran to come out and say we're responding, in the next 72 hours, but like that was all very calculated. They got to save face in a way, notwithstanding now the propaganda that they're putting out there is, all their stuff, it destroyed Negev Air Base and stuff like that, which we know it didn't. And a lot of people in the world know it didn't. But yeah, I don't think it's all that abnormal, honestly.
Yeah, and it's crazy because a lot of folks are looking at these things as isolated incidents. And when you dive into it, it's like Luke said, you turn on the news, you see this is going on or whatever, and you realize it's a much bigger picture than that because there are several different motivations out there on both sides of the house. So, supposedly, Iran was well, not supposedly, they launched the attacks in response to basically Israel turning the Iranian consulate in Damascus into a parking lot, right? Turned into a parking lot, killed a couple of generals and that type of stuff. Now, what was crazy though is I saw have you seen the map of where that consulate where it was?
Yeah.
Dude, it's like right across the right down the street from the Canadians and a couple others.
Yeah.
Like, wow, man, that's pretty daggum close. And then so you say, okay, well, they're doing it because they attacked, their consulate. And then you say, well, wait a minute, we attacked their consulate. Why? And it goes back to what Josh was saying. Iran does not want a direct conflict. The actions that they are taking that we've seen so far are below the thresholds of war, and they fight their battles through proxies. Okay, because what happens when you fight through proxies, you don't quite escalate to the level of a world war or a regional war or whatever, because like Josh mentioned, they know what's going to happen. So when you look at the proxies, and that's what Israel looked at, and that's what Netanyahu had looked at. You've got obviously Hezbollah in Lebanon, but you've got the support that they have with Hamas in Palestine, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, but you've also got the Houthis in Yemen. You've got two different groups in Bahrain. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different groups in Iraq, 2 other groups in Syria. What's interesting is there's a lot of rhetoric out there. So one, everything was staged. When Luke first said it, I didn't dismiss it. I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. But then as things started playing out, and then it was like, okay, we know there's going to be an attack in 72 hours. Well, I think at first when the White House came out, like, we know there's going to be an attack. It's going to be sooner than later. Mm-hmm. And then Joe goes to Delaware, right? And then he goes to Delaware and he's there for like, what? Is it even 24? I don't even know if it's 24 hours. And they're like, he's coming back. And then all of a sudden everything breaks loose and you're like, okay, so there was something more to this going on. And then you hear about all the drones, as far as half of them not making it, being shot down, things, obviously being, quote unquote staged. But then you look at, and I think the telltale sign is this. What does Israel do from here? So Israel's parliament or whatever has come out and they've given Netanyahu and the Ministry of Defense the ability to respond to this, right? Now, the popular rhetoric out there is that Netanyahu is doing this to draw Iran into a conflict to gain U.S. support for Israel's actions in that region. Because, just like with everything right now, you've got the Ukraine thing going on, you got the Hamas thing going on, you've got the Iranian thing going on, you've got Israel in the middle of half of that stuff out there. And so there's a lot of people saying that politically, this is how Netanyahu is going to keep that funding on the table, in the U.S., right? For us to send more arms, to refit their Iron Dome, to send them more money or what have you. What I think is funny about it all is one of you two sent the meme or whatever that showed the different rockets. And it's like you had their rockets and drones coming from Iran, and then you had their rockets and the drones from Israel. The reality is we paid for both sides of that. I mean, This is what pisses me off. They talked to the White House the other day about the money, the other $10 billion that was released or whatever. And they're like, what do you mean we released it? Like, dude, come on, man. Everybody knows this. This has been going on for like 2 years now, if not longer. But, Luke, I kind of want your, and add to whatever I just said, I want your opinion on what do you think Israel's response is going to be, because I agree with you, man. As this goes on, it's like, hey, this is staged, right? And if it is true, well, staged in that we obviously knew how much did we pass to the Israelis, and I think we're going to see that with Israel's response, because if we didn't necessarily pass a whole lot, and Israel seems like they've come out and basically said like, hey, we don't owe the U.S. Any type of preemptive information on what we're going to do. I mean, there seems to be a pretty solid divide there. So what do you think the response is going to be?
I think the response is going to be whatever the U.S. tells them to do. And it shouldn't be that way, but that's what I think. I kind of disagree with Josh that I don't think this was par for the course for a couple of reasons. Roger, you talked about the threshold of war, right? Nothing they're doing is within the threshold of war. I don't know if I agree with that or not, because I don't know what to make of all this, because 300 explosive vehicles going in. Let's say that we only eliminated 10 of them, 10% of them. That would have been some major damage in Israel. Who knows where those things were being targeted? It wasn't in Gaza, I can tell you that. So if let's say that 10% of them, only 10% were eliminated, and the other 280 or whatever made it in and just blew the hell out of everything. Was that within the threshold of war? And I'm getting to the point of what should Israel do, because it's to me it's more of a philosophical question that we'll get into. We talked about it in the text. But let's say half of it. Let's say we intercepted half of them and 150 made it through. By the way, only one person was killed. I had this conversation with my daughter. She doesn't understand, and most people don't, of how Israel actually works. There are Palestinians living in Israeli territory. There are Arabs living in Israeli territory. There is an Arab, a member of the Knesset, who makes laws. Okay,
Yep.
The only person to die that we've heard of so far is a 9-year-old Israeli Arab girl. That's the only person who died in that onslaught. But if 150 would have made it through, a lot more people would have died. I'll hazard to say it's possible more people would have died than did on October 7th, which is what started this whole thing. And by the way, the general that they bombed, the Quds Force general in Syria, was the one who organized and made the October 7th happen. Hamas being the proxy of Iran. Yeah.
Yep.
So that was a targeted attack. They didn't just do that just for the hell of it. That was us like doing Soleimani, or us doing like bin Laden, but not even bin Laden. It's more like Soleimani. So I don't know. I mean, the threat that's what makes me question this, because y'all said, and I agree with you, that Iran doesn't want a war. I agree with that. But 300 explosive vehicles launched at basically the same time. But I'll say this, the U.S. doesn't want war either between Iran and Israel. And that's what gives me pause. Because as one of our loyal listeners says, Josh, it's a guy we're both very familiar with, amateurs think tactics, professionals think logistics. Look, man, I've been around for a little while, and shooting down 300 aerial vehicles, like joint aerial vehicles. You got UAVs, ballistic missiles, 300, not even 300, almost 300 of them in a joint environment where you're working with Saudis, you're working with the Navy, you're working with the Air Force, you're working in multiple countries. The logistics of that is absolutely amazing. I know the Iron Dome shot down a few of them too. Maybe the majority of them. I don't know. But I do know the U.S., Jordan, and I love the King Abdullah up in the jet. I didn't even think about that. I was laughing my ass off. I was feeding the dogs out there when you guys
Cover art. Make it happen.
That. Oh, let me write that down. King A flying. Okay. So I'm just saying the logistics. Like, we had to know this was going to happen. And it was a coordinated response. It was coordinated, unless we're just a lot better than I think we are. I don't know, man. That's a big coordinated response. So it just creates a lot of questions in my head. And I'll tell you, someone else that has a lot of questions in their head right now is Zelensky, who's saying, wait a minute, you guys shot down 300 explosive aerial vehicles, and the Russians are just pounding us every day. Can I get a little bit extra? Can I get some change over here? Can I get kind of a little bit of cheddar? Can I get a little bit of that? Because Zelensky, he actually came out and said, hey, you should do the same thing here. But my thing is, well, Zelensky, all that was coordinated. We knew 72 hours and started planning. And who knows if we probably had good enough intelligence like GON to know probably where they were coming from. But still, Josh, I mean, I'm telling you, dude, that was a coordinated response. I mean, that wasn't just done on the fly. I'm telling you, that was not done on the fly. But what should the response be? Okay. I hope you're taking notes, Josh, because I'm all over the place. Hardly any of them hit. One person died. Negev airfield, negligible damage. My question to you guys in the chat was, I'm not going to answer Roger's question. I'm going to kick it around the horn. Let's say that the Japanese fleet, as they're, sailing across the Pacific, on their way to Pearl Harbor, let's say that we detected it and it didn't happen, right? Or maybe they broke down, but we found out after the fact they were going to surprise attack us. They were going to attack Pearl Harbor, but they didn't do it. What would we have done? Let's say that on September 9th of 2001, everybody was on their game and 9/11 didn't happen because we shut it down 2 days before, but it was announced to the public. This was what they were going to do. They're going to bring down the World Trade Center. They're going to crash in the Pentagon and the state Capitol building. What would we have done? I agree with Josh that there would have been a response, but what would the response have been? And that's what Israel is kind of in a conundrum, not necessarily a conundrum. It's like, how do they respond? Because nothing actually happened. They just prevented something from happening. It's like if the bully or whoever takes a swing at you and they miss, you have the right to, I think in a street fight, you have the right to pummel that dude to death. But that may not play out in a court of law. I don't know. Or you heard that this guy was going to attack you, but he didn't because of something or another. So you go and put a knife in his gut. That's not going to fly. I don't know. It's a conundrum for Israel, but I'll go back to, I think that they're going to do whatever the U.S. grants them to do, which I think is a shame. I wish they just bomb the hell out of Iran's nuclear sites.
You bring up some good points, and maybe I'll go back and rethink that. Was it a coordinated response? 100% it was a coordinated response. I think we knew, maybe not down to the exact number, but I think we knew, a roundabout number of, hey, we're probably going to see this not only through, whatever the Iranians, passed us, because Iranians didn't want us, because all of our military assets in the region, Iran probably let us know, like, hey, we are not targeting you. We just want you to know that. This is directed at Israel. It's not targeting you, which is smart on their part, and I would completely expect that. But between that and between, our own intelligence capabilities, we probably had an idea. We probably saw, because those ballistic missiles had to be moved, right? We saw trucks getting warmed up. We saw, things moving into place. We saw launchers going into launch positions and stuff like that. So we probably had a pretty good idea. And I guarantee you every satellite that we, have was probably slewed over, Iran, for 48 hours or so before that happened. We probably had a pretty good idea. Okay, this is probably about what's coming. We know the make, model, nomenclatures and, capabilities of those, weapon systems. And all right, we can shoot this down with the SM-3, which was the first time used off one of our RLA class destroyers, and whatever. But I want to touch on two things before I forget them, because one of our listeners, we chatted on Facebook about, Israel bombing the consulate and why that, why maybe Israel wasn't justified in bombing the consulate. And maybe Israel was looking to pick a fight, just kind of Netanyahu was looking to pick a fight with Iran. And I want to talk about it. So Kenny, this is for you, brother. And so anyway, real quick, so Kenny and I went to Warren Officer Canada school together. He's a good dude, fellow North Floridian. So Luke brought it up. So Sahidi, the Quds Force commander who was killed in that consulate strike, was the mastermind behind October 7th, where well over 1,000 Israeli citizens were murdered by Hamas, who is, it's well documented. Hamas is an Iranian proxy. They are funded by Iran. They are, they're provided weapons they're supplied by Iran. They are in effect an extension of the Iranian government. There was also more IRGC officers, Iranian militiamen, and a Hezbollah officer that was killed in that consulate strike. Okay. So a couple things, normally we don't attack consulates and embassies because those are truly considered, the soil of whatever nation they represent. However, when you are much like, a hospital, a school, whatever, when you are utilizing one of those sites for military purposes and military planning, that facility loses its protected status. All right. And it wasn't the host nation that blew it up, right? Because it was in Damascus, Syria, obviously. And so it really didn't apply. So Israel was well within its legal rights to go in and attack that consulate because it was being used for military planning operations against Israel. All right. And the guy who was in there had already masterminded and planned the murder over 1,000 Israelis. Okay. So this beef between Iran and Israel just didn't start when Israel decided to blow up their consulate in Damascus. It didn't start on October 7th when Hamas, paraglided into Israel proper, and started schwacking kids at a music concert. I mean, you could go all the way back to biblical times, for the problems that started there. And, we kind of chatted about this today, and how maybe the Middle East landscape would look a little different had the 1953 coup, the CIA-led coup, not happened in Iran, followed on by the 1979 revolution, and so on and so forth. Maybe the Middle East landscape might look a little different. But anyway, so I mean, you can take a look at the Khartoum resolution, the 3 no's: no peace, no negotiations, and no recognition of Israel. You can go all the way to, the 2000 when the Ayatollah, called Israel a tumor in the land of Islam. 2006, the Lebanon war that the IRGC fully participated in. The list goes on. Roger brought up some of the groups. You have Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, and Hamas, the PLO, Yasser Arafat, who is not a terrorist because he came to the White House invited by Bill and Hillary and had lunch. So therefore that he's not a terrorist, because he had lunch with Bill and Hillary. So to think that this all just started with Israel blowing up, the Iranian consulate in Damascus is you're leaving out quite a bit of history there. And if we want to take a look at the Middle East, before I say that, just a second point. So let's say we would have caught the Japanese fleet before they attacked Pearl Harbor. Let's say we would have stopped 9/11 on 9/9. There absolutely would have been a response, and I agree with Luke. It would have been muted, and I understand that that's the point. But there would have been a response. We would have invaded Iraq anyway, because George Bush was aching for a war. He wanted that war. He got it. And FDR wanted to get into World War II, but he needed a reason to get into World War II. But he absolutely wanted to get into it to take the focus off the economy, which was still terrible. Even after, the New Deal, everything, like it was still in terrible shape until after World War II, when it wasn't FDR's policies that really jump-started the United States economy. It was because the rest of the world was kind of shattered. And we were kind of the only ones that still had production capabilities left, at scale. So
that's what's so interesting, Josh, about these what if scenarios, right? Because with going to because 9/11 is a different, it's apples and apples kind of, along the discussion line. But with the World War II thing, maybe FDR would have used that as an excuse to enter the war, but that wouldn't have been as popular with the United States people. It's like, well, we didn't actually get attacked. It would have been that, and who knows, man, if it wouldn't have been popular, and he still's like, nope, now we're at war with Germany and Japan, because you remember the Kennedys, was it Joe, was like all in on the Nazis, man. He was like, this is actually good for Europe. So World War II was not popular before Pearl Harbor, but if Pearl Harbor hadn't happened, but we detected that, yes, it would have, and FDR used that as an excuse to get into a relatively unpopular war at the time, maybe I'd have to look at, because he wouldn't have, he would have served out his term anyway, but maybe he would have been a very unpopular president historically, because I gave some thought to that, Josh, and I'm sorry to steal yours or Roger's thunder. I gave some thought, and I still think it would have resulted possibly on nukes being used on Japan. But by the same token, it still could have drawn out further where the Germans could have gotten there first. I don't know. But it's just interesting to think about these what if scenarios, and it goes back to us not answering Roger's question about what Israel's going to do. So, Roger, what do you think they're going to do?
It's tough because Iran, obviously Israel doesn't have proxies around the region, right? In different countries that Iran can strike. So when you look at it initially, like, hey man, Iran flew drones. Now you go back to the coordinated attack. They're like, of the 300 that were launched, I think they said like 100 and would you say 100 and some odd actually made it off, and they're like, hey, about 50% didn't even make it off the pad or out of Iranian airspace. So there's a lot more evidence to that. But when you look at Israel's response, you say, okay, well, do they attack Iran proper? I don't think that happens. I think they end up hitting another, proxy site somewhere in either Syria or Yemen or something like that. Iran has limited choices, so they had to fly him in there. But going back to the coordinated thing, hey man, guess who also knew that it was coordinated? The markets knew because there wasn't a spike in oil. I remember hearing and I didn't come up with that. Luke's clapping. I didn't come up with that. I heard one of the, I think it was CNBC or whatever, like, he kind of threw it out there, kind of strange. We didn't really see the spike that we thought we would see, because fears are eased and yada, yada, yada. So the markets knew there's some people that were up and maybe it came down to the Treasury Secretary was like, hey, this is what's going on. We're good. You ease the investors and oil prices stay stable. So Josh puts massage strike some IRGC guys. That's what he thinks. So, he can go into that farther and probably, I guess the question would be, where at, right? Where does that happen? And, and Iran's proxies don't just, this is kind of interesting. Again, I know we're jumping around, but when you get to the pro-Palestinian protests that are going on here, and I'm looking for the article, but what I heard earlier today, there were some direct ties with the IRGC and some of the leaders of the pro-Palestinian protests here in the U.S.
And that's straight
right?
terrorism. That's straight terrorism.
Yeah.
Nobody
Absolutely.
dies. That's terrorism.
Absolutely. So then you ask, and then, you look at Tom Cotton's statement. I heard his interview. Did you guys hear Tom Cotton's interview early on? So I heard his first interview before he came out and clarified on Twitter. But he was like, hey, basically, I'm paraphrasing. Basically, there comes a time when the American people, man, you just need to take justice into your own hands. And I forget who the interview was with, but they're like, so do you mean like Americans, like, do you have anything to add to that? And he's like, no, there comes a time when, because they were asking what they would do in Arkansas. He's like, well, I would think my fellow, folks down here in Arkansas, they would take justice in their own hands, something to that effect. But, and then he came back on Twitter and clarified it or whatever, but I agree with it's an act of terrorism. But going back to the, Israeli response. And it's funny because right now you've got a lot of, even Putin came out and said, hey, Iran, kind of tone it down a little bit. You've got some Iranian folks out there through the media. They're like, hey, we don't want to be drug into another war. Now you've got Israelis. You're talking about the Israeli armies like, we don't want to be drug into the war. So I think there's a strike. I don't think it's on Iran proper. I think it's again on another one of those proxy groups or whatever that will be well publicized. It'll be all throughout the media. Hey, this is in response to this. It'll be devastating. It'll be shock and awe. And, like one person will die or something like that. But do you guys see that any different? Josh?
No. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. And I think when we talk about that, so, I mean, here earlier today, I think it came out. Israel killed one of the senior Hezbollah commanders in Lebanon with a strike. His car just kind of mysteriously blew up as he was driving it. And I think what we'll see, man. Right? It'll be akin to, after the Munich massacre, the Mossad, hunts a few dudes down of some significance, whether they're Hezbollah or Hamas or even IRGC, right? And it'll be on some, neutral ground, like at a hotel, like when they schwacked that dude in Dubai at the hotel. It'll be something along those lines that they do. That would be my guess.
I just think this is a really dangerous game. It does show if this all is coordinated and, there are diplomatic channels going on in the background, and Iran's like, in order to preserve, our survival, existential, we got our own problems inside, we got our economic problems, and all of this was engineered. I guess that kind of shows a level of competence on Biden administration and everybody involved. But I'll say what I put in the chat. This is a dangerous game we're playing right now. This is a very dangerous game because one misunderstanding and everything's going to get out of control, man. You try to control chaos. War is chaos. And I see this. I don't see it as a good thing all the way around. If it was controlled, well, if all this was controlled and telegraphed, I feel like I was lied to, and I feel like I'm being played. You know, we always talk about, Josh, that we just want to be told the truth. You know, if this is the ugly truth, just tell us. And if you're not, then why aren't you telling us, man? Why is this classified? It doesn't make any sense to me, you know. But again, I should scroll up to your quote there. I'm going to scroll up to your quote. I guess the reason is they're smarter than me, and I just don't understand the threat and what they're protecting us from. You know, these people all think they know better, and it's just a dangerous game, and I don't like it, man. I can see something going really wrong. So hopefully, I hope I'm wrong. But if anything, like with respect to the Biden administration, I think this reflects to the average American person. I think this reflects positively upon the Biden administration. I mean, it definitely makes the military look good. You know, freaking John Kirby, how stupid does he think I am? He's up there saying, you know, these F-15s were up there flying around, taking out all these things. It's like, I know roughly the payload of an F-15. F-15 can maybe take out 3, maybe 4, you know, with guided air-to-air missiles. But yeah, I don't know. I just feel like I'm being lied to.
Too close for missiles, switching to guns.
Maybe that'll be the next Top Gun movie.
Shooting down drones.
I don't want to change the subject. I bet Roger has more to say on this, but I don't want to change the subject, but I'm going to, and we can come back to Iran. But I saw a movie on Saturday night, and I talked my wife into going to see it because I've been waiting to see this movie for a long time. My wife's like, I don't know. It's kind of an action movie, whatever. She's not too interested in it. We went to see Civil War. Oh, my God. Don't waste your money. If you're thinking about going to see it, you know, our 7 listeners, don't. It's awful. It's horrible because there was no point to the movie. There was not a single, the only redeeming quality was Jesse Plemons. Everybody's seen the advertisement for the movie. What kind of American are you? Well, we're American. Okay, that's cool. What kind of American are you? Even that part, you know, his acting is great. And he was only in it for maybe 3 minutes of the movie, but his acting was great. He played the part really well, but the whole point of that part was stupid. It didn't explain anything. Just, hey, if you don't believe me, go see the movie yourself and I would like to hear why somebody think that's a good movie. It was awful. The plot was weak. Kirsten Dunst looked like she didn't even want to be there. And I was looking at Kirsten Dunst on the big screen, and I'm like, geez, man, Kirsten Dunst's getting old, man. She's older than me. She's got to be in her mid-50s. Kirsten Dunst is 41 years old. She looked awful, and she looked like she didn't want to be there. She looked horrible. And it's just the movie had no point. It was just some of the plot. Okay, basically, Rogers asked me to get to some of the plot. Basically, there's a civil war in the United States. We don't know why. That was one of the biggest things. That's why we went to see the movie is why is there a civil war? It's never explained. Nick Offerman, Nick Offerman is an American treasure, dude. That guy is great. The guy from Parks and Rec. He was in the movie a grand total of probably less than 2 minutes. He was the president, a 3-term president, which means they changed the Constitution, all this stuff. And there's a civil war, and there's all these different factions. Texas and California have teamed up together, and Washington's against them. And the plot basically follows these reporters, these 3, as a photojournalist, an aspiring photojournalist, and an actual journalist who their big plan is to go into DC as DC is being taken over by California and Texas and interview the president because he hasn't given an interview to anyone else. And it's like, gee whiz. I wonder if any journalist thought of this while Uncle Joe was marching into Berlin. Hey, let's go interview Hitler at his bunker. It's like, it's so ridiculous. It's like, really? I mean, you're in the middle of a war where it's being assaulted. You're going to be the magical Dora the Explorer journalist who can make it into the White House and interview the president as the White House is being taken over. It's like, but the question was never asked, what do you want to get out of the interview? It was kind of touched on, but not really. It was like one line of dialogue about it. So the plot is them getting to DC to interview the president. And I don't want to give any spoiler alerts just in case any of the morons out there want to go see it. but the payoff to the plot was absolutely nothing. It was absolutely nothing. There was no point to the movie, and there's nothing to read into it. Just 20 minutes of exposition in that movie. And exposition is usually what you want to get away from in movies where someone's explaining what's actually going on instead of showing it. In this case, 20 minutes of exposition, like this is what's going on, would have made that movie 100 times better, because you just don't know. There was no side to take, and it was just awful, man. It was a horrible movie. There are no redeeming qualities, zero. So I already told y'all don't go see it, but the good news is we went to a new pizza place and it was really good, and I got fat and ate a pizza.
Because you know what? They're lazy, dude. A lot of the producers nowadays are just lazy. It's funny because I think as you were, no, it was the day after, you went to go see that movie. And then the next day I was watching, I think I texted you guys, The Revenant was on. It was on HBO or whatever. And man, that movie it was well done. And you know it immediately. Like, I think I was probably 15, 20 minutes into the movie, maybe even a little bit farther than that. And my boy walked in the living room, a 21-year-old boy, and he walked in and caught like a good 30-second snapshot. And next thing you know, he's sitting down and he's like, man, I want to see this. It just, it's everything from the acting to the graphics, to the stage, to the setup. Like, you can tell, man, there was a lot of thought and a lot of effort put into that. It wasn't lazy,
No.
and it was good enough that, within that 30 seconds was enough to capture the attention of my 20-year-old boys. Like, hey man, is this on demand? I want to watch this thing, versus go ahead with your point.
Oh, I guess the only point I could take out of that movie is that if there was a civil war in the United States and it was an active, like, real shooting war, I don't think it would happen like that. We've discussed this. Maybe we could go down this road. We've got some time left. I don't think it would be an active shooting war with Apaches and F-35s and stuff, like tanks and things like that. Maybe it would get to that point, but that's how they were portraying it. But the point, I guess, I could take away, what he was trying to get across, is that if there was a civil war like that, most Americans would just not want to have anything to do with it. They would just sit on the sidelines and be like, I just want this to be over. I think that could be taken away from it, possibly. But I guess one of my biggest pet peeves came toward the end of the movie where, some of the combat scenes were okay. They weren't great. They were okay. But they had a couple, 2 or 3 dudes who were making a final assault. No spoilers, but they were making a final assault. And there's 3 dudes that kind of look like they moved like we're used to seeing people move. They're making calls like we're used to seeing people make calls. And then there was a DEI member of that team who was completely lost. And it stood out to somebody like me. That stood out. You got 3 people who were probably trained or at least paid attention when they were getting trained to shoot the scene. And you had one person who was totally lost. Her kit was fitting all goofy. Her Kevlar was on like sideways. And it's like the rest of these dudes are wearing low pro helmets. I mean, they're moving like, as close as Hollywood can portray to how operators move. And then this one DEI hire who's the hero of the scene. And it's like, okay, all right, you lost me. I don't know. So don't see it, Josh. I mean, did you guys see? I know we're talking about movies, and maybe we can go back to like a Civil War or whatever. But the good news is I saw Dune 2, and I just thought it was absolutely amazing. It was absolutely amazing.
I need to go back and watch the first one before I watch all these remakes. That's the problem, is a lot of these that are coming out, like the sequels or the remakes, whatever. It's been so long, like decades since I've seen the original, that I got to go back and watch the originals before I can even, watch the new stuff.
I know you guys aren't too into fiction and anything or whatever, but I really think you'd enjoy the Dune books because it overlaps politics, power, war, and religion. It's really cool. The way Frank Herbert did it, it's just amazing. He did that in the 70s. I think you guys, if you read fiction, would actually dig those books. And what I liked about the first Dune movie is it's the closest I think anyone could possibly come to replicating that book. So at least the first one. So I don't know. I recommend it. I do recommend Dune. I do not recommend Civil War. God, it's so bad. So Josh, okay. So let's say you, Josh, are you're you write a screenplay and you get to produce and direct a movie about a civil war within the United States. What would you want to portray and why? Like how would you do it? It's a big question, but like how would you want to make that movie?
I want to make that movie appear to be what a civil war in the United States would really look like, because what we had in the 1860s, that was not a civil that really wasn't a civil war. Those were it was two armies using Napoleonic tactics, against each other. That's not what would happen here, especially today. And I agree, it's not going to be the F-35. As bad as Joe Biden wants to use F-16s and Eric Swalwell wants to use nuclear weapons on their political, opponents, it's not how it's going to play out. People need to go out. People need to go on to Amazon and pick up The Dark Secrets of SHTF, Shit Hit the Fan Survival. It was written by a guy named Selko Begovic, and I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong, but the guy's a Bosnian, and it is a compilation of his experiences during the Bosnian Civil War in the 90s. All right, Roger made it to the Balkans. We made it to the Balkans. We saw what civil war would look like here, right? When you find your cousin in the county landfill and his hands look like Mickey Mouse gloves because he's got electrical tape around his wrist and he's got holes drilled in his knees and he's, all swole up from about, 3 days of laying in the sun. That's what it's going to look like. It's not going to be, it's what people think it's going to be. It's not. That's how I want to make that movie. I would go buy that book and read it. It's brutal. Like, it is absolutely brutal. But that's how it would be. And that's a movie I would want to make, to show people this is what it's like. And you think you want this. And even sometimes I have to remind myself, like, I want that. No, we don't want that. We don't want that. But that's how I'd make that movie.
Did you see the movie Savior with Dennis Quaid?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I envisioned something like that where, one thing I'll say about Civil War, I'll kick it to you, the movie, Roger, as I saw a news article, and I don't know if this is propaganda or whatever, but apparently the movie is doing really well in like blue cities. And if that's true, I think that says a lot about liberals in general. I think that they want more of a porn Civil War fantasy than, the MAGA people or whatever do, if that's true.
No, everybody wants to play Army until it's time to be in the Army, right? And I think Josh hit on the head. What everybody's, but it's also a different culture what we have here versus what they had after the Balkans. And I guess I'll throw this right back at Josh. Like, do you ever think we get to that point here, like true Civil War? Like, do you think we get to that point here? And if you think that we do, like, what's the catalyst? What starts that, or what's the ignition point for that?
Yeah, I think we could get to that point here. As far as
reparations.
No, I don't think that would. I don't think that would be the catalyst. I think it would be something along the lines of what we saw in 2020 with COVID lockdowns, and the BLM riots, or the mostly peaceful riots. Anyway, I think that's how it. I think that's how it starts, because you lock people down long enough, and then when those I think when those basic social services break down, I think that is the catalyst. When the grocery stores truly don't have food in them, I think that's how it starts. Reparations, dude, they could print money and give reparations. That's not going to start a civil war here. But I could absolutely see one happening here, just like we saw in the Balkans.
Yeah, I'm always like caring about Josh's feelings. I don't care about Josh's feelings. I just don't want him to think
you shouldn't.
It's not that I disagree with you. It's just, breakdown of social services. I get that, but a Balkans type situation or any kind of Civil War situation, Rwanda, especially our own Civil War. Well, not our own Civil War. That was, but there's a certain level of tribalism there. That's why I brought up abortion and reparations, like something that's along tribal lines. That's where one group feels taken advantage of the other one, doesn't feel that way. I guess it would depend on the reason the social services are breaking down. I did see a little bit of what you're talking about, Josh, in the COVID and the Antifa and all that stuff, where you were seeing some spots. I can't remember where it happened, where a group of quote unquote MAGA people went and beat the ever loving crap out of an Antifa, because there were only like 15 Antifa dudes and there were like 80 people who were there to beat the crap out of them. I did see a little bit of that there, but it's like, so what, but what caused that, what caused all the Antifa and all the riots was George Floyd, right? So that was drawn along racial lines. And I don't know, man. Roger, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, also jailing your political opponents. When that starts happening en masse and lawfare gets out of hand, there is going to come a point, and I've said this, I said this the other night in text. Trump is going to jail. Bragg is aching to put him in jail. He's already trying to hold him in contempt and saying that he should, be in jail. He came out today and said that they are aching to put that man in jail. Whether that's, I don't know that that's going to be enough to ignite a civil war, but that is definitely going to be something to keep an eye on, because if people think that Trump's the only one that they're gonna do this to, people haven't been paying attention.
Well, Roger, let's get this one pulled off YouTube as fast as possible. Okay, at 1 hour and 35 minutes. I hear you, Josh, and I agree. And I think this all but January 6th, right? So here we go. YouTube already logged it. I said that. So we've already hit one flag. It's like, I think it's been long enough. I think for those of you who haven't been following us since the beginning, we actually recorded a podcast on probably January 8th. And the three of us were pretty worked up, and Roger was producing it. And, we started a thread, and we're like, maybe we should rethink publishing this one, because it's just too much. We were venting a little bit. Some things were said, not subversive or anything like that, but just it was a hot time, right? But January 6th, I think what I took away from January 6th, my initial reaction was laughter. Truly, it was laughter, because, and I'll tell you why my reaction to watching it from Slovenia was laughter, because I was watching these politicians scramble and freak out because there was a riot. And that's what January 6th was. It was a riot, and it was stupid. I don't agree with what they did. Let me get that out there. I don't agree with what they did. It was dumb. It was stupid. You shouldn't have gotten carried away like that. There was a different way to make your point. If you really were passionate, you would have camped out there. How about that? You camp out in front of you bring tents instead of billy clubs or whatever the hell you brought. You bring tents and you camp out there and you make a point, right? Civil disobedience. But instead, they were stupid. It was a riot. But back to why I found it hilarious was because all these politicians and stuff were just scared. It scared the poop out of them. And they ran to their little bunkers and they did all that. And the reason I laughed was because, well, now you know what everyone felt like in St. Louis. You know where everyone felt like in Minneapolis. Now you know. Now you're experiencing what everyone else experienced for the past year. You spineless pieces of garbage that did nothing about it. But I think that January 6th, to not necessarily to Josh's point, kind of, that is a bad sign. It's a bad sign of where we're at, that actually happened. A riot out front of the Capitol where they broke in and stole Nancy Pelosi's lectern, which is funny to me. But
I follow that guy on Twitter.
You're going to have to share that with me.
Yeah.
But if you've been to the White House, Roger, lately, the last time I went was, I can't remember, but I took my wife and I went and walked around the White House. We had been there before, and my wife's like, "What's different?" I was like, "You can't get close to it. It's barricaded. It's like they're expecting something. Like, it's truly barricaded." I mean, have you been there lately? It's insane. And it's like, why is this happening? This is the people's house, man. I mean, well, the people's house, Congress, but we appointed the executive there. It's like, why are they so concerned with keeping people out? It's a bad sign. It's not good. It's unhealthy, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think you both brought up some situations where we're already laying the path for that. I think when you look at what happened during COVID, when you look at the BLM riots and Tifa riots, and then look at what's going on now that we kicked off the episode with, right, with them closing down the Golden Gate Bridge, you start talking about those loss of services like that, and what's important about it is what's been the response. They were talking about the Golden Gate Bridge was shut down for 5 hours. And it was funny because I was listening to it on the radio, and the reporter's like, yeah, CHP is out here and there's some local law enforcement, and they are doing absolutely nothing. They are just sitting there watching, and I'm kind of curious on what's going through their minds. The law enforcement officers out there, are they told just like, hey, man, just make sure nobody gets shot in the face, right? And I'm sure there's a certain percentage of them out there, like we were saying, it's like, hey, man, you're getting exactly what you voted for. That's exactly what they're getting. When you look at what happened in Philadelphia, it happened in San Antonio, in Chicago, in Baltimore, and LA, and San Francisco. You're getting exactly what you voted for. And all of that is, it's almost like, and I know they weren't trial runs, but they're trial runs. It's like, hey, man, you push the envelope a little bit. You push the envelope a little bit. And now you've gotten to the point where they literally shut down the Golden Gate Bridge for 5 hours, and law enforcement sat by. And they sat by because their hands are tied. Okay, their hands are tied. Their hands are tied by the legislature. It's funny you start talking about the January 6th stuff, because this was the last thing I was going to bring up before we close out. Because right now that case is up at the Supreme Court, and it's Fisher versus the United States. And so what's happening is the statute. There's a federal statute that the federal government is using to prosecute a lot of the January 6th rioters. And it's specifically, no, I'm not going to close out. I'm saying as we get to the last piece of our episode, but there's a piece in there that anyone who obstructs, influences, or impedes any official proceeding or attempts to do so commits a very serious federal felony and can be imprisoned for up to 20 years. There are like over 100 people, 100 of the rioters that are being charged with that, including Donald Trump. He's also being charged with that. What's interesting with this case, and it's something that we have to follow here, is that as they got into it in the justices, and I love Alito and Gorsuch on some occasions, Alito more often than probably Gorsuch, but Justice Alito was he expressed uncharacteristic sympathy for hecklers who interrupt a Supreme Court hearing, suggesting that prosecuting them under that same statute would carry a 20-year sentence, and that would go too far. Here's where Gorsuch gets gangster. Remember who was the congressman that pulled the fire extinguisher or pulled the fire alarm?
Yeah.
Can't remember his name. Remember his name.
Jamal Bowman.
There you go.
So Justice Neil Gorsuch expressed similar concerns about prosecuting someone who peacefully conducts a sit-in to delay a court hearing, or someone who pulls a fire alarm to disrupt an official proceeding. Okay. I heard that. I actually heard him say that, and I was like, spot on. So it'll be interesting to hear this play out, because that really tells you there are those on the left who have been brainwashed by the media into believing that was truly an insurrection. And it's exactly like Luke said. It was a riot. It was a riot gone bad. It should have never happened. I'm sure some of the people were like, uh-oh, I'm inside the Capitol building. Like, how did I even end up here? Right? Things happen and whatever. And you know what? The only person that died, that truly died, was shot by the Capitol Police. Now, if you listen to Nancy Pelosi and all of them, you've got 7 or 8 other officers that died of 9,000 other things, years later or what have you, that they say died in the Capitol riots, but that's not the case. But anyway, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. More, not just for what the federal government can charge you with, if they find, again, obstructs, influences, or impedes any official proceeding or attempts to do so. That kind of starts to conflict with the First Amendment. Right. I mean, I think there's some serious, and I think that's where they were ruled. But more importantly, it goes down to the Donald Trump case that's being tried down in Georgia. And I think they're saying that, yeah, that's one of the major charges there. And if the Supreme Court rules against that, then obviously they can't prosecute him for that. So I'll kick it to either one of you guys. So what do you think would go ahead?
No, go ahead. What do I think about what?
So the outcome of what's going on. So they went through the Trump trial up in New York. I think they have selected 7 jurors so far. They've got 5 more to go for the original panel, and then I think another 6 or whatever it is after that as alternates. Something was brought up earlier today that I thought was pretty interesting. So one, change of venue was denied. Change of venue was denied in a place that 85% of the people voted against him who did vote, right? And jurors are selected from the voter registry. That's how they're picked. So 85% of those people, we know for a fact, voted against him. So that's going to be a jury of his peers. But let me ask you this. When you look at a jury of your peers and finding somebody who's truly not biased, in his case with this, is that even possible?
No, it's not. Not at all. There's no way. He's Donald Trump. He's Donald Trump. Like, it's the most well-known name in America, period. So no, it's not possible. But I have been hearing a lot of talk about stealth jurors. And
yes,
both sides OJ's now. Yeah, and OJ's legal team, like, I hope they're being pretty smart about the jury selection. And I saw that Trump was chastised, or he was intimidating a juror or whatever. But I did see the other day he made a comment, and one of the jurors actually laughed at his comment. And it's like, I want that one. You know what I'm saying?
One of them actually read his book, and I think Trump said, I think they said Trump smiled. He's like, "Hey, have you read, the Art of the Deal?" I was like, "Oh yeah." It's like,
yeah,
okay, yeah, that's the guy.
I don't know. We'll see how this plays out. I'll say it right now. I don't think he's going to jail because he's Teflon Don. Maybe they got him this time, Josh. Maybe so, but I think he's Teflon Don. I don't think he's going to jail, even though that could be the best thing for him, politically speaking. So I'm going to get dogpiled here.
That's bad for both sides, right? I mean, he goes to jail, dude. That's bad for Democrats. Democrats as a whole, big picture. And I mean, it's bad for both sides.
I'm going to get dogpiled here, and we don't only have a few minutes left. I'm going to get dogpiled, and maybe we'll continue this into the next episode. And I haven't completely thought this out yet, but I gave you guys a preview. You may not have noticed in the text. Josh responded to it. One of the problems I have with Tim Pool, one of the many problems, is Tim Pool's always like, "You don't like where you live, move." I did it. It's like, yeah, you did it when you started getting big and you had the money to do it. Now, fortunately, all three of us, I think, are in a position probably where if things started going really south in Texas, which they won't, but if they did, and I felt like this is turning into San Francisco, I can't live here. I think I have the means. It would hurt, but I think I have the means to move. I do, but I am not like, well, the three of us are very fortunate. We've been very blessed. Roger made an inside comment. That was awesome, bro. Okay, you derailed me there. I think all three of us have been very fortunate to be in the position we are, and I'm aware enough to know that the majority of Americans are not in that position. You're stuck. A lot of Americans are stuck where they are, especially in California. Not everybody's Kurt Schlichter, who decides to stay because he can. He wants to fight the good fight. He was on one of our earlier podcasts where Josh mispronounced his name. But Tim Pool's like, you don't like where you live, just move. Just move. And I haven't completely thought this through yet, Josh and Roger. But, I hear a lot. We talk a lot about you're getting what you voted for. You deserve what you get. But my problem always had a hang up on that. And you guys know that. Because I think about those people who can't get out. That's why I brought up the point. I understand the federal government is a representative republic. But when it comes to state, especially city and county, I mean, it's truly democracy, man. And what is democracy? And I haven't completely thought this through. So don't dogpile on me too hard. I'm just bringing up a point here. It's like, what's a democracy? And people often say the colloquialism is a democracy, a democratic system is 2 wolves and a sheep voting on what they're going to have for dinner. And the implication is, well, the wolves are going to vote, we're going to have the sheep, and the sheep's going to vote, no, let's go out and eat some grass, and the sheep gets eaten because the sheep is overruled by the 2 votes. My question is, did the sheep get what the sheep, voted for? Did he deserve to get that? It's like, I don't know. It's an interesting point. I think that's kind of my hang up on you get what you vote for. It's like there are people who are not voting for that. and they're getting
No.
screwed.
You're misconstruing it. The difference is when you have 2 wolves and 3 sheep, and 2 of the sheep vote with the wolves to say we should have sheep for dinner. That's what I'm talking
Well,
about when I say
that's
they're getting exactly what they voted for.
yeah, but I don't think that's like I understand what you're saying. I get it, but my heart goes out to those people who cannot move. They're forced to stay there.
Oh,
That's
that
just
too.
the
But hey, like I just
lot
said,
that they're
85% of Manhattan voted against Trump. It's
I
a lot
know.
of sheep voting with wolves.
I know. So I mean, in Manhattan, that's kind of crazy because it's like, man, if you live in Manhattan, you're the 15%. You could probably afford to move.
Yeah, but say
right?
you can afford to move.
But I'm talking about that poor dude in Bakersfield or whatever who, is working, 70 hours a week, that hates what he's seeing. It's like, you deserve what you get because you're stuck there. It's like, I don't know, man. I mean, it's not right. It's not right. It is what it is, but it's not right. Like the sheep didn't get what the sheep deserve for voting the way they did. Now, if the wolves die because the sheep, the bone gets caught in the throat, well, then the sheep's still dead.
Well, I think when you look at it individually, yeah, you say, okay, hey, my point being is the masses voted for the train wreck that we have right now. And unfortunately, the rest of us are forced to pay that price.
Yeah, but we didn't get
so
we don't deserve what we get.
Talking about the blue voters, I'm talking about the
They
sheep
get
that
it.
voted with the wolves.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
Yeah, exactly.
fair
Because
enough.
a lot of them are complaining too. I mean, and that's what they're going to be the ones that like it or love it. They're going to be the ones that determine the outcome of the election.
I agree with you there.
Do they show up to the polls? Are they going to continue to vote with the wolves?
I guess it's just on that small minority, Josh, to hold out hope, that things are going to change and people will come to their senses.
Hold out hope. What are you hoping for? If you live in a red county, there's a lot of red counties in California. What are you holding out hope for? Are you hoping that the state legislature is going to change? Because it's not. Because I don't care how many red counties you have in California, you are never going to beat out the Bay Area, the LA Basin. You're never going to do it. The numbers it's not going to happen. So that guy in Bakersfield, hey man, I get it. Money's tight. You're working 70 hours a week. But if you're holding out hope that you're going to make a difference in that state, I'm here to tell you, brother, this shit ain't going to happen.
So
what you need to do, the solution is that you start a sinking fund. It may take you a year. It may take you a year and a half. But eventually you're going to save up enough money that you can get you a shitty apartment on the other side of the state line in Nevada. And hopefully you can find you a new job. Bakersfield ain't that far from Nevada. You're 9 hours from Tucson if things are,
Hey, there's a reason all 3 of us left Maryland, right?
Well,
yeah, it's just
that's not why I left.
But
I don't know. I mean,
I
seems
get
like
what
you're
you're
going
saying.
the Tim Pool route with it. It's like, well, if it really is affecting you like that, but it's the frog in boiling water, or it's the frog in the water kind of thing, right?
Maybe, but it's
very easy to speak from a place of comfort, like the 3 of us do. We speak 100%. From a place of comfort.
No, I don't disagree with you, but this is also akin to the millennial. I'm never going to be able to afford a house. I'm never going to be able to do this. I'm never going to be able to do that. Okay.
Well, you're Ramsey, right. You're crucifying him for that.
With your iPhone 15, and you're sitting at Starbucks typing this on your MacBook saying you're never going to be able to afford a house. Yeah. Yeah. If I was spending money like you do, you're spending money when I was, 19, 20 years old. Yeah. I would never been able to afford half the shit I have either. So the whole, I can't afford to move. Well, you might not be able to afford to move right now, but can you afford to move in 18 months? Can you afford to move in 24 months? If you can't afford to move in 24 months, there's some other shit you need to focus on than worried about what's going on in your state at that point. Because
I just don't think that's a solution. I don't think that's a solution for I know we're going into, we think we're going into different territory in this country, but I don't think the solution necessarily is Jesus. Oh, I set an alarm to text you something, Josh. I'll do it after the podcast.
Don't worry, our production team will edit that out.
No, keep it in. It's 9 o'clock already. So yeah, I don't know if that's the solution. For a healthy country, that shouldn't be the solution, right? It should be, I go back to what Roger was saying. It's like more like, yeah, you blue voters, you morons, you voted for this. Time to come to your senses. And we always not preach, but we always like, we should get more involved, school board. And Josh is probably taking the torch on that one, being the king of the HOA. And, props to you for that, Josh, because, you're involved at some point, but maybe the solution is for that guy who can't, move out of Bakersfield to get on the school board, or get more involved, someone who's not comfortable, can't afford to move. Hey, why don't you throw yourself into the community? And I don't know. Maybe
I don't disagree. I don't disagree.
I feel bad for the guy, dude. I feel bad. That guy you're talking about in Bakersfield, I feel bad for that guy who voted the other way, and it's going down the drain, and he doesn't have the resource. I feel bad for that guy, but I think in a lot of these, especially these blue states, he's the minority. I'm specifically talking about those other sheep that are voting with the wolves, because
you're always going to be the minority. You're always going to be the minority. Yeah. In those states, you're always going to be the minority. So.
Y'all just speaking from a position of white privilege is what y'all are doing.
Are you discarding my minorityness?
I think you're, man.
But my epicanthic fold isn't heavy enough.
Oh man.
He called you white. I wouldn't take that shit.
So the other night, I'm going to give a shout out. Now I'll pass it to Josh. And
dude,
Roger.
maybe we'll get boosted on like our Apple podcast thing because I'm Asian. I got to put that up there.
Boost that.
Minority
Asians are white.
Co-hosted, minority co-hosted podcast.
Class.
Come on,
it's a privileged class. I want to give a shout out to somebody. I know I should give a lot more shout outs, but yeah, Roger said you guys go ahead and close out because I'm going to kick it to you, Josh. You're going to close this out. I had a interesting back and forth with our listener Darren the other night, and Jer out there, really appreciate you listening, because every once in a while I'm like, he stopped listening, and then he'll be like, pull out a quote from an hour and 15 in. It's like, I can't believe you guys think this. So I appreciate him listening. But the other night, Darren and I got into a not heated, but I went a little over the top with Darren. He was like, well, I love listening to your perspective. And I went back and read the last 2 texts I sent, and I was like, I'm deleting these right now. Because I felt bad, because I'm like, I felt like I was, lecturing him a little bit. So I apologize about that, Darren. And Darren's one of the inaugural Snowdrop 55-hour ultra that Josh and JR are also going to do this next year. And Darren's not, but he's the one that got me to do it. And that's why Josh is doing it. I think that's why JR's doing it. So Darren, shout out to you. Appreciate you listening, and keep doing what you're doing. Darren has some really interesting friends. We should probably get him on the podcast. Roger knows Darren, and I'm glad that y'all know each other now on a whatever level that is. So, Josh, I'll kick it to you. I know there's a lot of other people deserving of a shout out, but you know how that goes. Y'all been listening for 3 years now.
Yeah, I just had a couple of shout outs. One, shout out to Kenny for listening. Definitely appreciate it. And then Derek and a couple other folks listening out in Hawaii. Definitely, as Luke says, time and time again, your time is the greatest thing you can give us, and we definitely don't take that for granted. We definitely appreciate it. So that'll do us for another episode here at the Cup. You didn't have to wait 3 weeks between episodes, so you're welcome. The more we're going to try and, record here again in a couple of days, just to have another one, in the hopper, because Lord knows what our schedule is going to look like day to day. Some people think we only have one job. All of us are very busy doing multiple things. So this is not just the only thing that we do. So until next time, keep those canteen cups full and tightly secured.
Shout out to the FBI. Make sure you follow us on X. Peace.